On today's show, special teams comes into focus again as the Capitals fall to the Bolts. What needs to get cleaned up? I'll discuss next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holmie. I've covered the Capitals for the past 4 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day and for making Locked On the number one sports podcast network. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, special teams breakdown is what cost the Capitals this game. And it is a reoccurring theme throughout this season. It's a reoccurring theme that happened last season. And at some point, that is what is staring the Capitals straight in the face. Fix the power play. Fix the penalty kill. Until you do that, we can expect for the Capitals to keep losing games. A bit later, we'll talk about Lil Pro. I'm talking about Ilya Protas, how he has been absolutely huge for Hershey. But just to get it going here, talking about the game last night as the Caps fell to the Bolts. And the game was basically over within the first 10 minutes. There was a feeling that when Justin Sourdif scored a goal that, yes, this is how the Capitals play the best. They play the best with a lead. I think they play more confidently. And but then the bottom fell out. And with this team, a lack of resiliency, they did fight back, but, special teams, I'm talking PK, power play, a total mess. So let's dive into that in the first segment of today's show. And the Capitals look like they were rolling. And then everything flipped in the first period. And, well, they never really recovered. And like I said, the game started out perfect. I had a feeling that this was going to go well. Justin Sourdif buries one a minute in, and you're thinking, let's go. Let's keep it rolling. The Capitals coming off big wins here against some big opponents. Could they make it 4 in a row? As it turns out, not the case. And, that's the kind of pop you want to build a streak off of. But again, Tampa, historically a really great hockey team and showing what they're still made of, answers almost immediately with a shorthanded goal from Brandon Hagel, and suddenly the vibe changes. And I would say that ghosts of Capitals past came back to haunt them, that they were to a certain extent a team that kind of receded into their shell. I know that we saw some late pushback from this team, but I'm talking structurally. When the structure breaks down, zone entries, special teams, that was where it really got drawn into focus. And a power play turns into other teams' momentum kicker. And the sequence is a game changer because it takes a boost away from you and hands it to the opponent instead. After that, the flood. 4 goals allowed in the first period. Logan Thompson kind of, I'm going to say uncharacteristically, gets pulled after giving up 4 on 6 shots, and kind of just speaks exactly what I'm talking about, that it wasn't, one player or one thing that caused the Capitals the demise. It was special teams big picture, but the team just looked out of sorts. I would say that Logan Thompson, of course, was not dialed in, as evident by the fact that he got the hook and Charlie Lindgren went in. And that first period became a canyon the Caps had to climb out of. But, here's the thing. The team actually played better after the first. When I say that the game was pretty much over within the 10 minutes, it's because it was kind of an insurmountable hill. They clawed back, but not enough. They generated chances. They pressured. And you take a look at the game. They got goals in there. It wasn't just Sourdif in there that they were getting production in the game, but ultimately it wasn't enough for the Capitals to rise above. In the game, there was goals from Chychrun, Frank, and Sourdif, and those 3 goals together was not enough to help lift the Capitals into the win column at the end of the day. But the Caps failed to capitalize, and the true swing moment came in the third, a 5-on-3 for over a minute. And that is a prime chance to flip the script. And when you don't score there, the clock just keeps sliding away from you. And I think that, like I talked about what happened in the game, that had the Capitals not allowed as many goals in the first period, of course, that it wouldn't have been as so insurmountable. When you take a look at the firepower that Tampa has, they're going to make you pay every time. In the first period, Brandon Hagel, Oliver Bjorkstrand, Brandon Hagel again, and Nikita Kucherov all find twine in the first period. That's not going to do. So it's one of those things that I think that once they started heaping on the goals, I think that it was just too much for them to overcome. So what does that say? And why is this important with the rest of the season? Because momentum matters in hockey. The Capitals started it, with Sourdif getting on the board first, but then the momentum quickly shifted in Tampa's favor. And if you want to run, you need to win these tight early skirmishes that set the tone. That, this team is about sustained success. It's not about winning 3 and then dropping a game. In order for the Capitals to dig out of where they're at right now, they're going to have to piece together more than, a 3-game streak here. And I guess I don't know what's going to happen here. We got Jackets and Jets on deck here, but it's not going to get any easier. And if you instead give the opponent a shorthanded goal and then cough up a multi-goal first period, you end up burning energy trying to chase the game instead of playing your game. And that's what we saw on Saturday. Actionable line to end this segment. Watch, what is going to happen going forward. How do the Capitals address this against the Blue Jackets? How do they address it against the Jets, right? That we don't want to keep falling into these same pitfalls again and again. All things considered, big picture, I like the resiliency. I don't like that they got, a great lead and they let that evaporate in a hurry. And you factor into that, Tom Wilson as well tried to drag the team into a fight, but he can't do it alone. And Tom Wilson showed up ready to fight. He tried to drag the team into some kind of response, but one guy can't cover for structural issues. And, it was Curtis Douglas. He got the instigator there, and ultimately he wanted to go. And, Tom Wilson's always happy to oblige. And an advantage over Tom Wilson, at least in height, 6'9", massive reach. Wilson steps in anyway. I've never seen Wilson step away from a fight. And, if you watch the game, he handled Curtis Douglas rather handily. Wilson said afterward, it started on a weird line change and suddenly we're in a fight. You saw Douglas drop the mitts before Wilson even got his off. But, that's Wilson. That's what makes him captain material. After Alex Ovechkin hangs up the skates, that's that leadership. That's him trying to grab the wheel when the car's kind of veering all over the road. And honestly, it did not give the team a spark that they were looking for. Oftentimes in these kind of situations, it does, but not the case. But, it was a good fight. And, I think it's funny that, there's a tough guy on the Bolts that thought, hey, this Tom Wilson ain't so tough. Well, I think what became, glaringly apparent here is that your height really doesn't matter a whole lot. It does to an extent, but it doesn't speak to just being, overall more powerful, a better fighter. That if you want to take on a guy like number 43, Tom Wilson, you better pack a lunch. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about the other issues in this game. And I'm talking about, in particular, special teams breakdown. And why does this team keep flailing in these kind of situations? I'll discuss straight ahead. Hockey season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be real, getting tickets can be a total headache. Between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout, it's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your favorite team. That's where Game Time comes in, the app that gives the fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NHL tickets. Easy and stress free. I love that you see what you pay is what you get. No hidden fees at checkout. Plus, I could see exactly what my view looked like before I bought the tickets with their in app seat feature. So every time I go see a game, I use Game Time. I love Game Time, and I know you will as well. So take the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I want to thank all of you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So in the second segment here, we're talking special teams, and early defensive breakdowns are a reoccurring wound. And well, it needs stitches here. And that's where we're going to start here, is the special teams and those early coverage lapses are not one-off problems. They are becoming a pattern, and patterns become seasons if you don't fix them. That we cannot ride on the highs of last season, that we won the Metro, we won the Eastern Conference in a game of what have you done for me lately. The Capitals have underperformed what they did last season. You take a look at the players that put up career numbers last year. They're not doing it this year. We can point to Alex Ovechkin. You know, he's finding his offensive touch, some other players, but Protas is not putting up the numbers that he did last year. And it's not even a player-to-player situation. It's big picture. It's systems. It's special teams, something that needs to get addressed before I say we're talking about the season that was. So let's make the case. The shorthanded goal by Hagel came right after the Caps drew a penalty. That is the exact moment you expect to assert control. But that was not the case in this game. And ultimately, you know, what started that wheel to wobble in this case? Instead, it turned into Lightning seizing control. And that's when things can get really sloppy in a hurry here. But you can point to structure here. You can point to puck management in the zone. That sequence revealed cracks. Then looked at the power play execution. You take a look at it, a 5-on-3 in the third for over a minute is essentially a blueprint to get back into a game. And they didn't capitalize on it, right? That when you are gifted these kind of opportunities and you don't make the most of them, well, you can't really be too surprised at the outcome in this kind of game. Excuse me, the Hagel one was a shorthanded goal. But, you know, big picture in those events, you need to make the most of those opportunities because the Caps had the look. They had the ice time, but their setups were perimeter heavy and they couldn't get traffic to the net. That the things that, you know, brought them success before, you know, and, you know, like when I talked about Spencer Carbery saying the non-negotiable for this team is that they must crash the net, that go for the greasy goals. I don't care if you're Alex Ovechkin or if you are an AHL call-up, you do what you need to do to win a game. And, you know, I think that it was this last game was all about momentum. And, well, Tampa ran away with it, you know, because what we didn't see was any net front presence, no decisive second chance play. That's a coaching and execution issue combined. And it's just not that as well. Like I say, it was kind of, I hate to say, a team failure on the defensive side. The first period featured too many players out of place in the slot that it almost seemed like, kind of kicking into like a fight or flight mode, right? That it seems like, they were getting outworked, and the things that Spencer Carbery and the assistants taught them kind of went out the window. Too much time and space for Tampa's skilled guys to make plays. When high danger chances pile up early, it forces desperation hockey. And desperation hockey is ultimately what drains a team of any momentum or will to win at the end of the day. It makes the rest of the night about bailing water instead of building. So what does a fix look like for this team? I'm a solutions guy, right? I think that you guys should be solution as well. Short term, you tighten the structure. Force the puck to the outside in the defensive zone, but a little less adventurous on your breaks until you're sure the coverage is solid. That, the breakdowns that we saw in this game, it wasn't a lot of, tape to tape passes. It looked kind of sloppy. But longer term, you dial in the power play personnel and the roles. Who screens, who tips, who drives the net. And you saw that not just in this last game, but previous games, like who's in the bumper position, who's doing this, that it seemed like the roles that were laid out for them, they didn't always adhere to. And those little role clarifications are where power plays live or die. And if the Caps want to be a true playoff level group, special teams can't keep tracking and tacking on deficits. They have to be a source of goals, not a source of anxiety for this team. So, you talk about the wins, that they had here as of late, and it's feeling good, but it all gets brought down to reality in a hurry when the Capitals don't make the most of their opportunities. Because in this game, power play, the Capitals were 0 for 6. And it's the little things, right? You take a look at Tampa, getting that PPG from Oliver Bjorkstrand is ultimately what put the bolts in the win column. Things that need to get cleaned up, right? And we don't want to keep talking about this because the Blue Jackets, they are in the Metro. They are vying for a spot. And, everything that the Winnipeg Jets did last season, that there is not going to be an easy stretch for the Capitals. They're going to need to clean it up. All right, so coming up here after the break, we're talking about down on the farm. The Hershey Bears, that is, little pro, Ilya Protas, the younger brother of Alexei Protas, is absolutely torching it. What's the latest with Lil Pro? I'll discuss straight ahead. The NBA is back, and there is no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who'll score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making a late push. So whether you're a fan of the Wizards or a fan of any team in the NBA, open up the FanDuel app, put a little bit of money on the game. All of a sudden, those games got that much more exciting. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up today and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube, like the videos, comment anything down below, and join the Locked On Capitals Insiders. Get direct text messages from yours truly about all the news surrounding the Capitals. There is more information in the show notes. All right, in the final segment of today's show, we're talking about Lil Pro. And I'm sure he's probably not too in love with being called that, but that is oftentimes what he is dubbed as, is Lil Pro, and not a small guy in any stretch, just the younger brother of Alexei Protas, still a big dude and still right there. If there is a call-up in Hershey to help the Capitals that's at least worth a look, I think it's Ilya Protas. So let's talk about that here. Even in a loss night for the NHL club, the organization didn't have a totally wasted weekend because Ilya Protas in Hershey is straight up producing, and that matters. Protas recorded a career-high 3 points and extended his goal streak to 5 games for Hershey. And that's the kind of sustained production at 19 years old in the AHL demands attention, and why I could point to, playing center, peel these out of the mix. We know that, the Capitals had that stretch of 3 games that it was feeling really good, but then, get knocked back down to reality. I think at least getting a look at Ilya on the big team here in the near future could be good. But talking about Ilya, talking about him playing in Hershey, and why does that matter to the big team, the Caps? Because the Caps aren't just trying to survive this season. They're trying to remain competitive while also building the next wave. This could very well be Alex Ovechkin's last season in the NHL, more specifically the Capitals. So they need to work on that next wave. And there are pieces in place, right? I'm talking Ryan Leonard. I'm talking LaPierre. These younger players, not to mention, all the players that are in Hershey, the junior levels that are right there to just help this team take it to the next level. But, when you take a look at a young guy in the system pops off like Protas, it gives the NHL club options. I hate to say it, that maybe other players would be expendable trade chips, depth creators, call-up insurance, all of the above. And, take a look at his profile. Heat on the puck, finishing skill around the net, confidence to drive to the dirty areas. That's not rookie luck. And, and I said trade chips there. I think that, at some point, if the Capitals want to go outside of the organization, that there's going to be a little pain there, right? That they're going to have to give up a player in Hershey, a draft pick, a roster player, maybe all of the above, if they want to get the player that they're looking for. But, when it comes to a guy like Protas, there's certain players, that I wouldn't touch, that are right there. But in any event, having a guy like that gives the Capitals options that if they don't want to go outside the organization, that Ilya Protas is right there. And it's not just me talking about it. The numbers back it up. He's leading Hershey in points and is tracking near the top of the AHL in rookies. Now let's talk translation. AHL success doesn't always equal NHL success right away. We saw that with Connor McMichael. We've seen that with Hendrix Lapierre. But it does earn you a look. And with the Caps dealing with some inconsistencies on the big team, especially in secondary scoring, special teams bringing in a young, aggressive forward could be exactly what this team needs. And the coaching staff has to answer the questions. Is now the time to reward him, or do you let him keep cooking and call him up when a role is more defined? I think at any point now, I would be willing to do it. It's worth a look. I think that if that doesn't work, you can check that off the list and then go full court press on bringing in someone outside the organization. But until then, I think it would be in the Capitals' best interest to try internal options, i.e. Hershey, and more specifically, Ilya Protas. But either way, this is a very positive story that the franchise can lean on while the NHL club recalibrates. So the biggest thing is the thing that the Capitals have done well here as of late is that they haven't fallen prone to win now mode. And you could say, well, they're kind of on the cusp of doing that if we talk about moving out, draft picks or this or that. But this team needs to do something for more consistent wins. I think what's important is not to get too caught up with the highs and lows, but let's be honest here. This season has been more lows than highs. There are these peaks, like the recent 3-game winning streak that is the high points of the season. That doesn't erase the mess that we have seen, at times. And the kind of hard thing for me to come to terms with is that this is primarily the same roster that it was last year. You had the subtractions of Radish and Mangiapane, that kind of thing. And you saw Leonard with a more defined role. You've seen Sourdif take off on that second line center position and kind of a role that I didn't have penciled in. I don't think anyone had penciled in. He was supposed to be that fourth line right wing, right? that Carbery put him in there, and that has worked well. But it's not just that; it's about getting the right personnel. But the biggest thing that needs to get underlined in all of this is the special teams, right? And that is something that needs to get cleaned up. You talk about power play goals, missed opportunities in a game that could have been an absolute game changer. The Capitals in this game, like I talked about before, were 0 for 6, right? And you take a look at it, had they made good on a few of those, we could be talking about the Capitals winning this game and say they had a better job, killing the penalty. We see that, the Lightning did pick up that power play goal in this game, that if they had not done that, and I don't want to wander around in the woulda, shoulda, coulda, right? But I'm just saying that things need to get fixed. And we're right around the corner. The Thanksgiving break is the measuring stick that's used around the NHL to kind of get a gauge of where a team's at. Where are the Capitals at right now? They're not the worst team. They're not one of the worst teams in the NHL, but there is definitely room for improvement. I don't want to say, hey, we're not bad, because look at, Calgary and look at, all these other teams. They're way worse. That's not the way that you should ever look at a hockey team. That's not the way that you should look at life. You should say, who are the teams that were better? And who is the next team that's right next to us? How can we overcome? How can we string together some wins so we can slowly start climbing, the standings here? Because that's what it's all about at the end of the day. That, in a lot of ways, the Capitals, last I checked, kind of hovering around a wild card spot there, that they need to start closing these games. And I think, in fact, I know that they do need to bring in personnel. They need to first try Hershey, whether it's Ilya Protas or someone else. And if that doesn't work, like I say, check that off the list and let's go full in on a scoring forward, more specifically a top line, a top 6 center, if you will. It's not going to be cheap, and there's going to be a little bit of pain associated with it. But I think big picture, if the Capitals want to contend in the 25-26 season, that is what they must do. Listen, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are what makes this show successful. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night, until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan HOLMI, and I'll talk to you again next time.